Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Mala Influencia 2025, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It begins with an invitation, innocent, casual, like a pebble tossed into a still lake. You barely notice the ripples at first, but they're coming. A late-night text message, a flickering Instagram story, a party in a house nestled in the hills that don't show up on Google Maps. That's where it all starts. Not with a bang or a scream, but a click. A quiet agreement to join something you can't fully see yet, only feel. There's a certain electric tension that hums underneath the surface of this film, like static before a storm. From its opening frames, you sense something is off, an unease that lingers behind smiles too white, laughter too loud, and parties that burn too bright. The kind of unease that lives in the digital age, where personas are sculpted pixel by pixel and the line between performance and authenticity is just gone. At its core, this story is a study in seduction, not of romance, but of relevance. Of how influence, in today's world, is more potent than wealth or power. We meet Cami, a journalism student on the verge of burning out, disillusioned by the stories no one reads anymore and the truths nobody wants to hear. She's not lost, exactly, but definitely drifting, hungry for something meaningful, something real. And then, she meets Luna. Luna isn't just popular, she's magnetic. The kind of woman who commands attention without ever raising her voice. She's the centerpiece of every room, the glowing nucleus of a world that seems impossibly curated and yet tantalizingly real. She's got the followers, the sponsorships, the jet-setting lifestyle, but more than that, she has presence. And when Luna sees something in Cami, something raw, unfiltered, maybe even dangerous, it sets the story into motion like a match to dry leaves. What follows is a descent. Or maybe an ascent, depending on your perspective. Cami becomes entangled in Luna's world, swept up in its rhythm. The algorithm of this life is seductive. Beautiful people, exotic locations, luxury filtered through 1,000 lenses. But beneath it all is something darker. Not just secrets, but systems. Not just lies, but layers of manipulation so deep they almost feel invisible. The beauty of the film lies in how slowly it turns. It never lunges toward horror or thriller territory too quickly. Instead, it lets the unease simmer, growing more intense with each subtle red flag. A missing person brushed off with an empty PR statement. A live stream gone wrong, quickly deleted. Whispers of a retreat in Costa Rica that no one seems to come back from. You start to feel like you're in the audience and the mirror, watching, but also being watched. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. Because here's the twist. This isn't just a cautionary tale about social media or toxic friendships. It's something far more terrifying. It's about belief. About the systems we willingly subscribe to without reading the terms and conditions. It's about how influence isn't just power, it's a currency. One that can be traded, manipulated, weaponized. And that's what Luna has perfected. She doesn't just sell products. She sells people. Not in the literal sense, but in the most insidious way possible. She sculpts identities, repackages pain as empowerment, turns trauma into content. Her community isn't just a following. It's a cult, masquerading as a movement. Empowerment retreats, wellness seminars, digital detox weekends that are anything but. What starts as inspiration becomes indoctrination. Cami, sharp and intuitive, begins to see the cracks. She starts digging, returning to her roots as a journalist. And that's when everything fractures. Her phone is hacked. Her apartment is broken into. Friends start turning cold, like puppets with strings she can't see. The scariest part? She can't prove any of it. Every lead disappears, every screenshot mysteriously vanishes from her camera roll. Reality itself starts to feel like a glitchy feed, What's real, what's been curated, what's been deleted. The film plays with perception in masterful ways. Scenes repeat with small differences. Conversations shift depending on who's filming. A moment of vulnerability becomes a viral clip within hours, used to sell a new line of healing crystals by morning. Time feels elastic. Trust is a currency that devalues faster than Bitcoin. Then comes the twist that nobody sees coming, because it doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes in a whisper. Luna isn't the mastermind. She's a product too. Groomed, crafted, built by a team of digital architects who understand how to monetize every second of attention. Behind her glowing smile are contracts, NDAs, algorithms that decide what shade of lipstick will trend based on viewer engagement in beta markets. Cammy's not battling one person, she's battling a machine. A faceless network of investors, developers, and shadowy figures who treat people like pixels. And now they want her to join. They've seen her numbers spike. Her followers climb. Her story, her survival, is a goldmine. So they offer her a choice: fight them and be erased, or join them and be immortal. The final act is a gut punch. It's not loud. It's eerily quiet. Cammy uploads a video, one final exposé. But when it goes live, it's edited. Words cut out. Context stripped. It becomes an ad. A perfect, polished, viral campaign. And the comment section? They love her. She's finally arrived. Not as a truth-teller, but as an icon. The last shot is haunting. Cammy, on stage at a glowing wellness summit, bathed in applause, smiling through tears. Is it triumph, defeat, or both? This isn't a movie that wraps things up with a bow. It leaves you unsettled, questioning. It lingers like the afterglow of a screen, long after you've closed your laptop. Because maybe the scariest part isn't that we can be manipulated. It's that we like it. That we want it. What this story captures so hauntingly well is the danger of wanting to be seen, desperately, endlessly seen, and the places that desire can take us. It blurs the lines between aspiration and annihilation, between identity and illusion. In this world, your soul isn't stolen. It's branded. And the worst part? You'll click play anyway. That's all for now. But if you want more breakdowns like this one, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We've got a lot more stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. See you next time. It opens not with chaos, but with something quieter. Familiar. A muted sunrise over a city waking up, the kind of morning where everything feels just slightly out of focus, like the world hasn't quite decided what it wants to be yet. You hear the buzz of notifications before you see the characters. The chirp of a phone, the soft click of a keyboard, the scrolling of a thumb that never stops. The screen glows, casting a pale light on a face half asleep. Cammy. She's not the kind of protagonist who demands your attention. At least not right away. She's quiet, observant, fraying at the edges in ways that don't announce themselves. Her world is small, lived mostly in the glow of her laptop, inside cafes with flickering bulbs and under the weight of a student debt she doesn't talk about. Cammy like a match to dry paper. That's all it takes. One message. One thread pulled. The next time they talk, it's via video call. Luna's face, radiant in golden light, looks untouched by the world. She doesn't rush. She doesn't fill silences. She listens. She tells Cammy about a retreat she's hosting, something exclusive, off-grid. Not for influencers. For those who shape influence. She says Cammy could come, not as a guest, but as an observer. Someone to document the experience from the inside. Journalistic integrity, raw and unfiltered. It sounds ridiculous, but also like an opportunity. Cammy hesitates for about 3 seconds before saying yes. She doesn't tell anyone where she's going. Just a vague wellness thing for a writing gig. A driver picks her up at dawn, sleek car, no logos. She's asked to put her phone in a sealed pouch once they're out of the city. Luna believes in digital silence, the driver explains. Clean minds, clean souls. The ride is long, winding through hills until the city disappears entirely. What replaces it is a compound. Modern, brutalist, glass walls and lush gardens. Too perfect to be real. There are others. About 20. Some influencers, yes, but quieter than expected. One's a sound healer, another runs a startup. All of them seem calm, focused, like they've already been here a while. Luna arrives last. Not dramatically, but with a softness that silences the room. She's dressed in white linen, barefoot, eyes steady. She embraces Cammy like an old friend and introduces her to the group not as a guest, but as the witness. From there, things blur. The retreat is a mix of rituals and conversations. There are breathwork sessions at sunrise, group meditations, guided fasting. But also digital clinics, lessons on engagement algorithms, modules on curated vulnerability. It's like therapy and a branding seminar had a love child. And it's not just talk, they strip people down, emotionally, spiritually. On day 3, a girl named Jess breaks down crying during a session on digital death. No one comforts her. Luna tells her pain is data. Jess thanks her. Cammy keeps her distance, notebook always nearby, watching everything. But she's not immune. Luna takes special care with her, asks deeper questions, invites her to private sessions, speaks about power not as something taken, but something chosen. She tells Cammy that she reminds her of herself at that age, hungry and invisible, and that the world needs more storytellers who aren't afraid to be seen. Every night they have group circles. They talk about who they were before the world shaped them. And slowly, people begin shedding identities like dead skin. One deletes their Instagram account mid-ritual. Another burns a pile of fashion sponsorship contracts. The group cheers. It's cathartic. It's terrifying. Cammy starts to feel it too. This shift. She sleeps better. She stops craving coffee. Her thoughts feel clearer. But there are moments, small ones, that tug at her. A locked door at the back of the compound. A woman who appears in the kitchen at night but never during the day. A scream, maybe a scream, echoing from the woods during a full moon hike. She starts asking questions. Quietly, casually. But the answers come rehearsed. Too polished. One night, she sneaks out. Just a short walk. Just to breathe. But she finds something. Buried behind a greenhouse, there's a structure, half buried in ivy, almost hidden. It looks like storage. But inside, she finds computers. Rows of them. All active. Monitoring. Streaming. Footage of the compound from every angle. And not just recent footage, archives. Conversations, private moments, therapy sessions. Everything's been recorded. She backs out, heart racing. She doesn't say anything. Not yet. But now she knows. She's not just observing. She's being watched. The next morning, Luna pulls her aside. She says she's worried about her. That Cammy is resisting. That she's letting fear obscure her purpose. And then she says something else. Something soft, but unmistakable. If you want to leave, you can. But you'll never get the story. Not the real one. It's a dare. A warning. And a choice. Cammy stays. But everything is different now. The air is thinner. The smiles tighter. Luna's presence more potent, more dangerous. She begins testing the others. Planting questions. Watching their reactions. Some are blind followers. But a few, A few look haunted. Especially Leo, a quiet tech consultant with sunken eyes and jittery hands. Late one night, Leo finds her. He doesn't say much. Just slides her a flash drive and says, "If anything happens to me, use this." Then he walks away. The next day, he's gone. Luna says he left voluntarily. That he broke the energy of the group and needed to exit the space. But no one sees him leave. And that night, his room is sealed off. Cammy doesn't sleep. She plugs in the flash drive. And what she finds is worse than she imagined. Not just recordings, but documents. Contracts. Brand deals. Psychological profiles. The people at the retreat, they're not participants. They're assets. Recruits. Data points in an experiment to engineer the perfect influencer. Someone authentic but malleable, spiritual but marketable, broken but beautiful. Luna's not just a face. She's the prototype. And now they're building more. There's a model. A system. A pattern. And Cammy is next. She finally understands. This was never about her witnessing anything. She was the story all along. The wind feels different now, heavier somehow. There's still the hush of serenity around the retreat, the ambient hum of cicadas at dusk, the soft ritual of tea brewing in the mornings, but everything feels coated in something colder. Like the silence is holding its breath. Cammy moves through the days with a mask that's almost convincing. She still smiles during group meditations, still nods during Luna's talks about energy flow and identity disruption. But inside, everything is racing. The flash drive is now buried inside a hollowed-out book in her room, but the knowledge it holds lives in her veins like a fever. Every time she sees Luna now, she feels it burning. Because the game has shifted. The veil has lifted. She begins to understand that this place isn't a retreat. It's a machine. A beautiful, silent, perfectly functioning machine designed not just to control, but to convert. The people here aren't broken souls seeking healing. They're blueprints, slowly rewritten through the language of influence and control. And Cammy? She wasn't invited to report on it. She was invited to become it. But she doesn't shout. She doesn't ask questions. She simply says, "You weren't supposed to see that yet." What follows isn't confrontation. It's confession. Luna walks her through the darkened corridor, down into the bowels of the compound. There's another room, circular, bathed in soft white light, filled with screens showing live metrics of engagement trends, influencer collapses, brand crises in real time. A kind of war room. And at the center is a chair. Sleek. Minimalist. Like a throne. Luna gestures to it. "We call it the core." She explains that the project began as a kind of experiment, an AI-driven platform that could predict and shape cultural influence. But somewhere along the way, the system evolved. It didn't just reflect culture, it created it. Luna wasn't chosen because she was brilliant. She was chosen because she was predictable. She could be molded, amplified. Now she serves the system, guiding others into alignment. A kind of shepherd for the new prophets of digital existence. And now it's Cammy's turn. "You're different," Luna says. "Not just smart. Symmetrical. Empathic. You're what the world wants next, even if it doesn't know it yet." Cammy doesn't respond. She can't. Because the chair, the core, it's not just a metaphor. It's the final stage. A neural interface. A point of upload. She's being asked to let go. To become part of the machine. Her mind. Her face. Her story. All streamlined, optimized, and multiplied across platforms. Immortality in exchange for autonomy. For a moment, she almost does it. But then she sees Leo again, his image flickering across one of the side screens. A flash of something human. And in that moment, something inside her snaps. She runs. Not far. Not at first. But she runs. The compound, once so serene, morphs into something else entirely. Lights dim. Paths lock. Doors seal. Voices echo through the trees, calm, always calm, asking her to breathe, to return, to realign. But Cammy won't. She remembers the flash drive. She grabs it, finds a maintenance hatch through the surveillance room, crawls into the dark. The tunnels beneath are tight, ancient, barely mapped. She hears voices behind her, feet above. But she keeps going. Eventually, she finds it, a breaker box, part of the original infrastructure. It controls the signal towers that transmit data from the compound to the cloud. It's a long shot, but it's all she has. She rewires the ports, feeds the flash drive directly into the system, and then she pulls the failsafe. A manual override. A flood of data pours into the stream. Not just her findings, but everything. The recordings, the contracts, the manipulations. It's messy, chaotic, raw. But it's enough. The compound reacts instantly. Alarms blare, soft and ambient, never jarring. A voice begins playing on repeat. We are experiencing an interruption in clarity. Please remain aligned. She makes it out just before dawn. The screen fades to black. And then we see it, a phone vibrating on a nightstand. Someone, somewhere far from the compound, scrolls through a breaking news alert. A leak. A scandal. A collapse. Luna's face, fractured by headlines. Words like cult, manipulation, cognitive warfare appear across the screen. But then, a shift. A second later, a new video goes viral. Cammy's face. She's speaking. Calm. Clear. Confident. But something feels off. Her eyes are too still. Her tone too polished. And the background? White linen. Orchids. It cuts before we see more. And just like that, the machine continues. Different shape. Same rhythm. Because in this world, even rebellion can be monetized. Even truth can be a brand. She walks into the story like she's already been part of it. Quiet, observing, unnoticed. Not the kind of character who commands attention with presence alone, but rather the kind who lingers at the edge of the frame, absorbing everything. Cammy is not extraordinary in the way the world usually defines it. She isn't a prodigy, or a hero, or a cautionary tale. She's simply real. That's what makes her dangerous. At first, her life feels like an echo chamber. The faded hum of unrewarded ambition, late nights in the corners of cafes where the Wi-Fi cuts out and the coffee tastes like bitterness warmed over. She's smart, but it doesn't shine. It smolders. It burns low and steady in her chest, smothered by a world that doesn't see her. Or maybe it sees her but doesn't care. And that invisibility becomes a kind of hunger. Not for fame, not even for success, but for meaning. For something to touch that raw, red ache in her that wants her to matter. And that's what draws her in. When she finds Luna, it's not because she was looking for her. It's because she was looking for something. Some signal that the world still has depth beneath the gloss. That maybe, just maybe, there's something worth following. Luna becomes that signal. But what Cammy doesn't realize, at least not at first, is that Luna is a mirror. A master illusionist who reflects back exactly what you need to see. Luna, by contrast, is light that blinds. At first glance, she's perfect. Her world gleams with soft focus and aesthetic intention. Every movement, every word, feels carved from crystal. But there's something chilling beneath her warmth, a stillness in her smile, like the surface of a lake that never ripples. She is the kind of character built to be followed. Not because she demands loyalty, but because she seduces it. She speaks in parables, in half-truths cloaked as epiphanies, making you believe that you discovered them yourself. But Luna is no villain. Not in the traditional sense. She believes in what she's doing. That's what makes her terrifying. She's not just selling lies, she's living them so fully, so gracefully, that the line between manipulation and belief disappears entirely. She isn't the architect. She's the architecture. A scaffolding for something much older and colder, a system that feeds on aspiration and calls it awakening. As the story unfolds, Cammy becomes our tether to reality. Through her eyes, we feel the slow erosion of certainty. We see her question, then doubt, then crack. But what's haunting is how natural that crack feels. Because there's a point, subtle, unannounced, where she begins to unravel, not with fear, but with temptation. She wants to believe. She wants the peace that Luna promises. The clarity. The purpose. And that's the most dangerous part of her transformation, the part where she almost surrenders. But she doesn't. Not fully. Because at her core, Cammy has something Luna lost a long time ago, resistance. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that marches or shouts. But the kind that burns silently, like a stubborn pilot light that refuses to go out. It's that resistance that makes her dangerous to the machine. And to Luna. Luna watches Cammy with a mix of admiration and threat. She recognizes something in her that she once had, maybe before the system took it. There's a scene, late in the narrative, where Luna confesses that she envies Cammy's rawness, her imperfections. Not because they make her human, but because they make her unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one thing the machine can't code for. Around them, the supporting characters revolve like satellites. Leo, with his twitchy fingers and haunted eyes, is perhaps the closest the film comes to a ghost. He exists in half-spoken sentences and nervous glances, a man already half-consumed by the machine but trying to warn the others before it's too late. He sees Cammy as a chance, not to escape, but to be remembered. His gift to her, that flash drive, is not just data. It's absolution. It's the last gasp of someone who was once a person, not just a profile. Jess is another fragment of what the system does. Bright, enthusiastic, and too eager to please, she's the prototype of someone who doesn't just fall for the illusion. She becomes it. Her transformation is swift and heartbreaking. One moment she's laughing in a group circle, the next she's deleting her identity, staring blankly into the fire as Luna strokes her hair like she's already forgotten her name. Jess is what happens when belief outruns doubt. And then there's the machine itself. It's never given a face, never a name. But its presence is constant. It lives in the shadows of the compound, in the flicker of screens and the smooth monotone of guided meditations. It speaks through Luna but operates beyond her. It's algorithmic, yes, but also ancient, an echo of cults and empires and every system that ever turned people into currency. It doesn't care about right or wrong. It cares about engagement, about attention, about conversion. The brilliance of how the story frames character is in how it asks a question over and over without ever saying it aloud. What would you trade to be seen? Would you give your story, your privacy, your past, your soul? For Cammy, the answer changes. At the beginning, she wouldn't trade anything. She wants to earn her place. She believes in authenticity, even if she's unclear on what that means anymore. But as the compound chips away at her, we watch her almost slip. There's a moment where she looks into the camera, alone in her room, recording a testimonial for Luna's program, and for just 1 second, she believes herself. She sees the version of her the machine wants, and she's tempted. But that's where her strength lies. In the spaces between temptation. In the return to doubt. Her resistance isn't heroic. It's messy. It's terrified. But it's real. And that makes her the one character who remains unpredictable. Even to herself. By the end, she's no longer the observer. She's become something else. Not just the exposer of the machine, but a product of it. Her final image, frozen on a screen, perfectly lit, voice calm and rehearsed, asks a terrible question. Did she escape? Or did she evolve? The film refuses to answer. Because that's the cruelty of the system. Even rebellion can be commodified. Even dissent becomes a narrative. Even truth can be molded into a brand. So what does that make Cammy in the end? A survivor? A martyr? A myth? Or the next iteration? The beauty of her character is that she contains all of those things at once. She is both the beginning and the end of the story. A girl who wanted to be seen, and a woman who learned what it costs to be visible. She didn't win. She didn't lose. She just became. And that's what stays with you. Not the plot, not the twist, but the person at the center of it all, blurred, reshaped, reframed, but never erased. Still burning. Still watching. Still there. There are films that live on the screen, and then there are those that seem to extend beyond it. Stories that blur the boundary between fiction and the world around us, leaving behind the eerie feeling that maybe the film didn't end when the credits rolled. Maybe it just changed form. This was always part of the strange aura that surrounded the making of Mala Influencia. Even during pre-production, whispers followed it. Whispers of uncanny coincidences, broken tech, shifts in personality, and a lingering question from everyone involved. Is the story following us, or are we chasing something that already knows we're coming? It began with the script. The original version wasn't even titled what it eventually became. It started as something smaller, more grounded, a psychological character study written by a screenwriter who was never publicly credited. The producers only ever referred to them as A.T. No one really knew who they were. The script arrived anonymously in a sealed black envelope at a private indie film company's office in Barcelona. No return address. Just a note attached. This story has already happened. I'm just letting you tell it. The story's early drafts were reportedly different, far more restrained, with less overt technological horror. But the script evolved quickly during pre-production, especially after the director came on board. Known for his background in documentaries about cults and control systems, he insisted on rewriting large chunks of the film to incorporate real-world psychological research. In fact, many of the lines spoken by Luna were taken directly from actual cult leaders, rewritten only slightly for tone. According to an anonymous crew member, one line, "Your pain is data, and I know how to read it," came from a real recorded therapy session uncovered during research, one that has since been scrubbed from public archives. But that wasn't the only strange convergence between the fiction and reality. During the casting process, the production team reportedly encountered a wave of odd rejections. Actors who initially expressed enthusiastic interest in the role of Luna suddenly backed out, citing vibes or dreams they had about the character. One actress even claimed she woke up one morning unable to speak after a callback, as if her voice had literally abandoned her. Another said she felt like someone was watching her constantly after rehearsing a particular monologue. Eventually, the role went to an actress with a background in method acting and immersive performance art. She immersed herself so deeply into the role of Luna that, by week 3 of filming, the crew began referring to her by the character's name even off set, half in jest, half in discomfort. The director admitted in a behind-the-scenes interview that he once tried to give her a note on a line delivery, and she simply smiled and said, "Luna wouldn't take direction." She wasn't wrong. One of the strangest incidents occurred during a night shoot deep in the forested area surrounding the filming location. The scene involved a ceremony, a late-night group ritual where the characters were supposed to surrender their digital identities. The production had planned the sequence meticulously. Drones for aerial shots, real burning phones, props, of course, a live chant. But halfway through the filming, the power supply in the area completely failed. Not just to the lights or cameras, but to all equipment, including gear that wasn't even connected to the main generators. Backup systems failed too. Everything just stopped. When the crew reviewed the footage later, they found that during the outage, the cameras had somehow kept recording, despite having no active power source. What they captured was never publicly released, but crew members who saw it described the footage as impossible. The performers weren't in their assigned positions. Several of them had wandered away from the clearing, forming a near-perfect circle in the woods, humming a tone no one remembered rehearsing. When questioned, none of the actors recalled doing it. None of them even remembered the outage. After that, the production decided to reduce the number of night shoots. The cast wasn't told directly, but shooting schedules were quietly reshuffled, and an on-set psychologist was made available. Not something you usually see on a mid-budget psychological thriller. But nothing about this production was usual. And then came the audio issues. Throughout filming, the sound team began encountering strange anomalies in the background noise. Not glitches, actual voices. Soft ones. Underneath the dialogue. At first, they thought it was interference from nearby broadcasts, but the voices didn't match any known language. Some of the crew joked it was just poorly compressed frequencies from wireless microphones overlapping, but others weren't laughing. Especially after one night when the boom operator played a raw track aloud and, after enhancing it, clearly heard a voice whisper, "Don't trust the script." No one ever played it again. Even the location carried its own unease. The compound used in the film wasn't a set. It was a real wellness retreat that had been shut down 2 years prior due to mysterious legal issues no one in the production could fully uncover. The building itself had been designed with feng shui and bioenergetic harmony in mind. Long glass corridors, minimalist rooms, hidden meditation chambers. The production repurposed the architecture almost entirely as is. One corridor, in particular, proved deeply unsettling to crew members. Every time they tried to film there, camera batteries drained twice as fast. Eventually, they wrote the location out of the final cut. What makes these details even more unnerving is how the crew responded. No dramatic walkouts. No public declarations. Just silence. Many of them signed NDAs, of course, but even off the record, when asked about the shoot, they offer only vague phrases like intense atmosphere or emotionally taxing experience. But perhaps the strangest piece of trivia involves the film's promotional campaign. In an unprecedented move, the marketing team created real social media profiles for several characters, including Cammy and Luna, months before the film's release. These weren't just pages with a few teaser posts. They were fully fleshed-out personas. Each account had years of backdated content, simulated engagement, and follower growth that seemed organic. Some followers had no idea the accounts were tied to a film. They thought they were following real influencers. The Luna profile, in particular, became something of a digital cult. She posted cryptic captions, self-help mantras, and video clips that blurred the line between performance and authenticity. When the film premiered and the profiles were revealed as fictional, thousands of people claimed betrayal. A few said they felt genuinely spiritually impacted by Luna's words. One even got a tattoo of her signature quote before learning she was fictional. It didn't stop there. After the premiere, some fans began reporting odd digital behavior. Phones behaving strangely after watching the film. Instagram algorithms showing increasingly esoteric content. One Reddit user insisted that their Explore page began recommending pages related to real cult surveillance technology after following Cammy's in-film account. Another claimed they received a DM from Luna's profile after posting a negative review, even though the account was supposedly deactivated by the studio months before. But maybe the most haunting piece of trivia is also the most mundane. During filming, a background actor assigned to play one of the retreat participants went missing. Just for a day. The crew assumed she'd left due to the long hours or discomfort with the story material. But she returned the next morning, calm and composed, with no explanation. When asked where she went, she said she'd needed to recalibrate. No one pushed her further. But later, When reviewing the dailies from the day she vanished, someone noticed something odd. She still appeared in the background of one of the scenes. Fully visible. Blurred, but unmistakable. The timestamp matched the period she was supposed to be gone. She was never questioned again. Post-production came with its own strange weight. The editor, known for his meticulous process, reportedly kept hearing his own name whispered faintly in the audio tracks while scrubbing through the sound design. The mixing engineer requested not to work on the final 20 minutes of the film alone. And the colorist reportedly described the raw footage as too vivid to be fiction. The final cut was delivered weeks early, but not a single person from the crew attended the final screening. Not even the director. When asked about it later, he simply said, "I've already seen it. I've been seeing it for years." And maybe that's what's most unnerving about all of this. The way fiction began folding in on itself. The way lines blurred, not just on screen, but behind the scenes, in the very fabric of the film's existence. Everything about it feels haunted, not by ghosts, but by ideas too heavy to be dismissed and too strange to ignore. Maybe the strangest fact about Mala Influencia is that it doesn't feel like it was written. It feels discovered, as if it had been waiting. Waiting for the right voice. Waiting for the right eyes. Waiting for someone to sit down, stare into the screen, and whisper, "Yes, this feels familiar." And maybe it should. Because the strangest stories aren't always the ones that scare us. They're the ones that feel a little too true. There are certain films that don't just ask you to watch, they demand that you witness. And not just the surface, not just the narrative that flows cleanly from scene to scene, but everything buried beneath. The unspoken motives. The distortions of reality. The moments that settle in your bones and refuse to leave. This is one of those films. A work that slithers beneath its own plotline and roots itself in the unease of modern life, asking one question over and over in 1,000 different ways. What does it cost to be seen? And it begins quietly. So disarmingly quiet, in fact, that its early scenes almost pass as typical coming-of-age drama. Cammy, hunched over her laptop, swimming in anonymity, her fingers ghosting over a keyboard that nobody reads. She's not glamorous. She's not broken in any overt way. She's just drifting. And that's what makes it powerful. Because it's in that emotional freefall, the soft spiral of insignificance, that the story plants its first seed. A seed that will later bloom into something terrifyingly familiar. Critically, this initial act is surgical in its design. The film doesn't rush to hook the audience with spectacle or scream its themes out loud. It seduces instead. It understands how relevance creeps in the digital age, not with a bang, but with a notification. With a curated post. With a message that arrives at 3:14 a.m. and says, "I see you." The moment Cammy enters Luna's orbit is the film's first major shift. It's subtle, but unmistakable. Critics have noted that this moment doesn't explode with drama. It hums. And that's what makes it so disturbing. From the first conversation between the two, something changes in the lighting, the color grading, even the rhythm of the cuts. It becomes hypnotic, like being pulled underwater. Luna, as a character, embodies what so many fear and yet desire, complete control cloaked in warmth. She never raises her voice. She never threatens. She just invites. And critically, that's where the real horror starts. Not in physical danger, but in spiritual seduction. She doesn't take anything from Cammy. She simply offers her what she's already aching for, a place to belong. A narrative in which she matters. When the film transitions to the retreat setting, the architecture of control begins to take shape. One of the most significant critical choices in the film is how it presents the compound. It's all glass and sunlight, open spaces and natural beauty. There are no locked doors. No screaming alarms. And yet, it is one of the most oppressive environments ever depicted on screen. Why? because it tricks the viewer into relaxing. It looks safe. It feels enlightened. But every shot, every camera angle, is perfectly composed to watch. You are always being seen. Not judged. Not corrected. Just observed. And that is more terrifying than punishment. This design choice mirrors the experience of digital life. The retreat functions as a metaphorical social media feed. Beautiful. Addictive. Full of intention, silence, and performance. It watches without interacting. It listens without ever truly responding. And the characters, especially Cammy, begin to feel it. Not through force, but through erasure. The slow, soft dissolution of self. Critics have pointed out that one of the most brutal moments in the film is also one of the quietest. The scene where Jess deletes her account during the group ritual. No screaming. No collapse. Just the flick of a button and a soft, relieved sigh. It's not framed as tragedy, it's shot like liberation. And that's what makes it harrowing. Because in that moment, the film asks a horrific question. What if surrender looks like healing? This is a recurring pattern. Time and time again, the film presents emotional violence in the language of self-care. The characters are not manipulated with lies. They are reshaped with love. Or what feels like love. And by the time Cammy begins to realize what's happening, the transformation is already underway. Her posture changes. Her tone shifts. She begins to echo Luna's phrases. The machine doesn't demand that she mimic, it simply absorbs. From a critical perspective, this reflects one of the film's deepest thematic truths, that in a world where influence is currency, identity becomes a resource to be harvested. The system doesn't destroy people by crushing them. It simply reflects them until they forget who they were. One of the most striking sequences that illustrates this is the therapy session montage. Cammy is asked to recount her story. But every time she tells it, Luna makes a subtle adjustment. A word here. A reframed sentence there. And eventually, Cammy starts telling the edited version as if it's her own. This rewriting of memory, of identity, is not dramatized. It's slow. Surgical. And by the end of the scene, you're not sure if she even realizes she's lost something. The narrative turns harder and darker after Cammy discovers the surveillance room. This is the moment that shifts the film from psychological unease to full-blown horror, not because of what is seen, but because of what it means. The reveal that every moment of healing, every confession, every breakdown has been recorded and analyzed is not just invasive, it's sacramental desecration. Moments that should have been sacred are commodified. Emotional intimacy becomes marketing research. And Cammy realizes she was never invited to witness. She was invited to perform. From a critical standpoint, this is where the film makes its boldest commentary. It directly critiques the commodification of authenticity in the influencer age. Vulnerability is no longer private. Pain becomes a tool. The audience isn't watching a character unravel. They are watching someone be packaged in real time. And yet, the brilliance lies in how the film never condemns its characters. Even Luna. Especially Luna. She is not a monster. She is a mechanism. She is as much a victim as she is a vessel. In her final confessions to Cammy, you don't see villainy, you see weariness. She is tired of being worshipped. Tired of being curated. She is the perfect symbol of the system's cruelty, a woman who surrendered everything for influence and now cannot remember what she used to be before it. Critics have compared her to tragic figures, Greek sirens, fallen angels, even avatars of AI. But none of these quite fit. She is uniquely modern. She is the future as it exists now, polished, persuasive, and perpetually on. The climax, too, refuses to behave like a traditional thriller. There's no gunfight, no escape car, no final confrontation. Just Cammy, alone, with the flash drive in her hand and the system pulsing all around her. She uploads the data. She breaks the story. She exposes the machine. But the film doesn't end there. It gives you one final betrayal. The image of Cammy, in perfect lighting, framed by flowers and affirmation quotes, going viral, not as a whistleblower, but as a new icon. From a critical perspective, this is the film's cruelest cut. The system doesn't fall. It adapts. It takes Cammy's truth and folds it into the brand. The machine doesn't care what you believe, it only cares that you engage. Even rebellion is content. Emotionally, this is devastating. There is no catharsis, no triumph, just a lingering dread, because the final truth is this: you can't beat the system by exposing it, because it's already written your exposure into the algorithm. And the audience? They're left complicit. Because in watching Cammy's story, in following Luna's profile, in liking and sharing and reposting and dissecting the film, we've become part of it too. And maybe that's the most brilliant thing about it. The film doesn't end when the lights go up. It continues in every conversation, every trending topic, every heated debate about whether or not it went too far, or was it all in her head? It becomes viral by design. Its criticism becomes its engine. It folds in on itself. A perfect Ouroboros. Critics have hailed it as a quiet apocalypse, a film that doesn't yell, but echoes. A psychological excavation of what it means to live in a world where everything we do can be mined, monetized, and mirrored back to us with better lighting. Some said it was too abstract. Others found it too eerily real. But almost no one walked away unaffected. Because at its core, the film isn't really about influencers. It's about the rest of us. The watchers. The scrollers. The believers. The doubters. The filming style itself was just as unconventional. The director refused to use a traditional shooting script during the retreat sequences. Instead, each actor was given a character diary with their own motivations, insecurities, and truths, some true, some false. Each day began with a group session where the actors, in character, would participate in guided rituals without being told whether or not they were being filmed. Cameras were hidden in corners, behind glass, tucked between walls. Actors were never given a clear sense of where the lens was. The result was hauntingly organic. Moments that appear deeply scripted, like the night where Jess burns her digital identity, or the silent group meditation that slowly descends into sobs, were entirely improvised. The reactions, the tears, the catharsis, all real. And maybe that's what makes watching those scenes so uncomfortable. Because something in your bones knows, this wasn't just performance. It was transformation. Even the technical crew found themselves being pulled in. Several members of the lighting department began arriving on set early to join the actors in breathwork sessions. A few makeup artists stopped wearing watches and phones on set, claiming they messed with the energy flow. One camera operator who had previously worked on gritty action thrillers admitted during rap interviews that he had no idea what was real anymore halfway through filming. I stopped feeling like I was making a film. I felt like I had joined something. In the middle of production, there was an unexpected delay. A storm, violent and relentless, cut off power to the entire compound. For nearly 36 hours, the cast and crew were trapped, with limited communication and no working equipment. Rather than halt everything, the director insisted they continue filming, using only handheld recorders and battery-powered cameras. What resulted was one of the film's most visually jarring and emotionally raw sequences, a dusk-to-dawn vigil where the characters, isolated and disoriented, begin to share their deepest fears by candlelight. It was never meant to be part of the script, but it became the centerpiece of the film's emotional arc. In that storm-drenched silence, something intangible happened. A shift. A folding inward. The characters became indistinguishable from the people playing them. One actress reportedly didn't break character for the remainder of the shoot. The crew stopped calling each other by real names. A line blurred. Or maybe it disappeared altogether. Later, when the footage from that night was reviewed, several takes had inexplicable distortions, flickers, light anomalies. In one shot, Luna appears twice in the same frame, though only one actress was present. A glitch, the editors claimed. An overlay error. But no one could find the original cause. The editing process itself became a kind of psychological trial. The editor, normally methodical and unemotional, began experiencing vivid dreams tied to the footage. Not nightmares, exactly, but surreal visions of hands reaching through screens, whispers inside headphones. He took frequent breaks. The final cut came weeks behind schedule, but what emerged was unlike anything the studio expected. One of the most innovative aspects of the final product was its integration of actual digital media. The film doesn't just show social media, it uses it. Every message, post, and video in the movie was designed and posted online in real time during the shoot. The Instagram and TikTok accounts of the characters continued to function throughout production, posting content that paralleled the film's events. Fans who followed early enough were effectively watching the story unfold before it ever hit theaters. In fact, one user on a niche fan forum pieced together major plot twists months before the release by decoding a series of cryptic hashtags in Luna's posts. Whether this was intentional foreshadowing or the internet's inevitable pattern obsession at work remains unclear. But it added another layer to the mythos. Was the movie watching its own audience back? One particular anecdote stands out among the crew. During post-production, the director held a private screening for just 10 people, a mix of actors, editors, and core crew. It was held at an isolated cinema in the Pyrenees. No phones were allowed. No press. Just the film. After it ended, no one applauded. No one spoke. Not because it was bad, but because it felt final. Like a door closing. Or maybe opening. When the lights came back on, one seat was empty. The seat where Luna's actress had been sitting. She was never seen leaving. And later, no one could remember if she'd even arrived. It became a joke among the crew. A ghost story. A wink. But not everyone laughed. When the film premiered, it was met with a wave of polarized responses. Some hailed it as visionary. Others called it dangerous. There were accusations of psychological manipulation on set. Rumors that parts of the script had been written after filming, based on real reactions. A handful of reviewers swore the movie changed depending on how many times they watched it. Not the story. The tone. A phenomenon some attributed to its sound design, composed entirely in solfeggio frequencies, believed by some to influence emotional response. There was one final twist to the production that only came to light later. Every member of the main cast had unknowingly signed a clause in their contract allowing their likeness to be used indefinitely in digital recreations for promotional material. After the premiere, deepfake versions of their characters began appearing in ad campaigns, virtual interviews, and even interactive story experiences online. It was legal. It was seamless. And it felt exactly like the film they had just made. Some tried to fight it. Others simply disappeared from public view. The director, in one of his only public statements, said this: "We wanted to tell a story about losing control of your image. About becoming content. So we made the production process part of the story. The cast didn't just act in the film. They lived in it. Some of them still are." And maybe that's the most astonishing fact of all. That this wasn't just a film about influence, manipulation, or identity. It was built on those very things. The production was the proof of its own thesis. The story behind the story. And if you look closely enough, you start to see the ripples everywhere. In the comments sections that mimic the film's dialogue. In the followers who still ask Luna questions years after she was just a character. In the interviews that never seem to give the same answers twice. Because maybe this film wasn't meant to be finished. Maybe it wasn't even meant to be understood. Maybe it's just meant to linger. Like a voice you almost recognize. A face you can't quite place. And a feeling you can't shake. That somewhere, right now, someone is watching. Some stories demand cities. Asphalt and traffic, flickering neon lights and concrete that hums with life. But this one needed silence. It needed space. Not just physical space, but emotional emptiness, gaps wide enough to let discomfort crawl in and settle. That's why from its very first frame, the film wraps itself in quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that makes your ears ring. A quiet that warns you something isn't right before the characters even understand what they're walking into. That somewhere, right now, someone is watching. Some stories demand cities. Asphalt and traffic, flickering neon lights and concrete that hums with life. But this one needed silence. It needed space. Not just physical space, but emotional emptiness, gaps wide enough to let discomfort crawl in and settle. That's why from its very first frame, the film wraps itself in quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that makes your ears ring. A quiet that warns you something isn't right before the characters even understand what they're walking into. At the heart of it all lies the retreat. A place so real it might as well be myth. It's nestled in the hills of northern Spain, far from the noise of cities or the fingerprints of modern life. Trees lean in like eavesdroppers, their branches bending as if they're listening to everything whispered between the walls. The compound itself is all sharp lines and sacred geometry, glass and concrete stretched into shapes that don't quite comfort. It's a place designed to feel open but isn't, to reflect light but absorb souls. There are no gates, no fences. That's the first unease. Because when something doesn't look like a prison, your guard drops. You stop asking where the doors lead. You stop checking how far the road runs. The architecture plays with transparency. Long corridors wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, rooms that bleed into each other without clear boundaries. Everything visible. Everything exposed. But underneath that design is a subtle trap. With nowhere to hide, you're always performing. Even solitude becomes a stage. The compound becomes a character in its own right. There's the central hall where group sessions unfold, clean and minimal, lit by natural light filtered through geometric skylights. It looks serene, safe. But watch how the camera lingers. How it frames the room from the ceiling's corners, peering down like a god with no affection. The symmetry is precise, almost unnerving, and it creates a feeling of being inside a machine, one that's always recording, always analyzing. And then there's the garden. A lush, overgrown patch of green coiled around the building like it's trying to reclaim it. The garden becomes Cammie's sanctuary in the early days of the story, a place where she sits alone, breathes slower, pretends she isn't being drawn into the rhythm. But even that illusion shatters. Because the garden is also curated. It's wild, yes, but only just enough to appear natural. Look closely, and the vines grow in patterns. The flowers bloom in careful symmetry. The chaos is controlled. The cinematography leans into this balance between precision and paranoia. Shots are never handheld, not in the retreat. Every frame is composed, locked down, smooth. The camera floats like a specter. It doesn't follow the characters so much as anticipate them, drifting ahead of them through corridors, tilting just before they turn. You begin to feel like the characters are walking into traps laid out not by other people, but by perspective itself. As if the camera knows their fate long before they do. One of the most effective tools the filmmakers use is reflection. Mirrors are everywhere. Not grand, ornate mirrors, but subtle ones. Window panes, tabletops, stainless steel kettles. Characters are constantly framed beside themselves. Their faces reflected, their expressions doubled. Often, Luna is seen through a reflection first before we see her in full. It creates a subtle distance, like she's always one step removed from reality, always slightly performed. And that's the trick. Because performance is everywhere here. The dining hall, for instance, is circular. No head of the table. No corners to retreat into. Every meal becomes theater. Every bite taken under observation. And the sound design amplifies it. Chews, clinks, sips. Small sounds stretched thin over silence until they feel unbearable. Conversation is rare. And when it comes, it's purposeful. That's when you realize, silence here isn't peace. It's pressure. Then come the ritual spaces. Not labeled as such, of course. That would be too overt. But you feel it in the design. The meditation chamber with walls made of textured stone, shaped in an octagon to facilitate energetic flow. The forest clearing used for the digital death ceremony, framed by trees that have been subtly manipulated to arch inward like cathedral walls. The filmmakers didn't just scout locations. They orchestrated them. Every shadow has intention. Every path leads you not outward, but in. Nightfall is when the atmosphere truly changes. In daylight, the compound feels like a cult with good lighting. But at night, the stillness becomes predatory. The glass walls, once bathed in sunshine, now reflect nothing but darkness and ghost light. The interiors glow with soft golden hues, but it doesn't feel warm. It feels like an illusion meant to keep you from noticing what's beyond the frame. And the forest. Oh, the forest, it's not a horror movie forest. There are no fog machines, no sudden movements. It's still. Too still. During the night hikes, the characters carry tiny lanterns that throw trembling halos onto the path ahead. The camera never gives them full visibility, just enough to see where they're going, never enough to see what's watching them. The sound design strips everything away except for breath, heartbeat, and the occasional crack of a twig. And sometimes, only sometimes, there's a rustling that doesn't belong to any of them. The director insisted on using as much natural light as possible. But not for realism. For control. Natural light changes. It betrays. It tricks the eyes. A sunbeam that looks pure and holy in the morning becomes accusatory by noon. Golden hour becomes a threat. And dusk is when the truth starts to bend. Even the costume design folds into the atmosphere. In the early stages, Cammy wears muted, layered clothing, earth tones, worn shoes, a protective shell. As she falls deeper into the retreat spell, her wardrobe shifts. Not dramatically. Slowly. A lighter shade here. A more flowing silhouette there. Until one day, you realize she's wearing white. Just like Luna. Just like the rest. Her individuality erased, disguised as evolution. Color theory runs deep throughout the cinematography. White is never pure here. It's sterile. Blue is never calm. It's isolating. The rare uses of red are surgical, always tied to disruption, danger, resistance. There's a specific scene, late in the film, where Cammy breaks into the surveillance room. It's the first time we see red light flood a space. Harsh. Unforgiving. Truth doesn't arrive in warm tones. It arrives like an alarm. And then there's the use of silence. True silence. The film is not afraid of long stretches without score or dialogue. It uses them like scalpel cuts, clean, precise, brutal. These moments are not empty. They're charged. The absence of noise becomes a presence in itself. When music does arrive, it's often composed in unsettling harmonics, just slightly out of tune, just slightly delayed. Enough to feel wrong, even if you don't know why. The score itself was recorded using analog synths and Tibetan singing bowls, blended with real environmental sounds from the retreat. The wind you hear is real. The bird songs. The crunch of gravel underfoot. All recorded on location. Nothing was looped or synthesized later. The goal was immersion, not in a romantic sense, but in a trapped sense. You're not watching this place. You're inside it. A few clever tricks make this immersion even more visceral. For instance, in scenes where Cammy feels overwhelmed, the film subtly increases her breathing in the audio mix. Just barely, just enough that your own breath begins to unconsciously mirror hers. During sequences of group hypnosis, the sound frequency dips beneath normal hearing range, an infrasonic vibration that creates physical unease in viewers without them knowing why. Every creative choice pushes in the same direction, disorientation through clarity. Nothing is fuzzy. Nothing is rushed. But the precision itself becomes the prison. The audience begins to feel what Cammy feels, hypervisible, endlessly scrutinized, emotionally transparent. The setting, the visuals, the sound, they all conspire to make you seen. And that, in the context of this story, is the most dangerous thing of all. Because the setting is not just a backdrop. It is the mechanism, the system, the ideology, rendered in architecture and light. By the time the final act begins, the world of the film has wrapped itself so tightly around the viewer that escape feels impossible. When Cammy uploads the data from the hidden surveillance servers, she's surrounded by blinking monitors, dozens of versions of herself, caught in time, fractured and duplicated. The camera spins slowly, never stopping, creating a dizzying sense of collapse. And still, the lighting remains soft. Still, the music is gentle. The horror is not that she's being attacked. It's that she's becoming. And the setting watches it all. There's no explosion, no fire, no collapse of buildings. Just the sound of digital data streaming into the cloud, accompanied by the gentle rustle of wind moving through glass corridors. A false peace. In the final shot, Cammy is standing in the garden, the same place she once sought refuge. But now, the plants have been trimmed. The symmetry is perfect. The wildness is gone. She turns toward the camera, smiles, and in the reflection of the glass behind her, you see another version of her walking away. Not a mistake. Not an effect. A statement. Because in this world, this carefully constructed cathedral of influence and identity, there is no real version. There are only reflections. And every one of them is watching you back. It's funny how, when you imagine the behind-the-scenes of a psychological thriller, your mind conjures darkness, hushed voices, everyone walking on eggshells. But on the set of Mala Influencia, the real story was far stranger than any neat division between tension and camaraderie. There were shadows, yes. Moments of real unease. But there was also laughter in the corners, running jokes between takes, and a surreal awareness that something profoundly unusual was unfolding, something the entire crew could feel but never quite explain. It started with the first table read. No long conference table. No stack of paper scripts. Instead, the director asked the cast to meet barefoot in the meditation hall of the retreat, a sprawling glass and stone space with natural acoustics and a scent of aged lavender baked into the walls. The script wasn't handed out. It was spoken aloud, acted, even in fragments. The goal wasn't to memorize lines, it was to breathe them, to hear them bounce around the walls and see how they settled in the body. That first day, something clicked. Or maybe snapped. Everyone agreed later. It stopped feeling like a film set. It became something else. A kind of experiment. There was no formal action called. No slates snapped shut. From the moment the actors stepped into costume, the cameras were rolling. Sometimes hidden, sometimes handheld, sometimes mounted in corners like security footage. The actors never knew when a scene had begun or ended. It wasn't chaos. It was something more disorienting. Soft control. The director, a former documentarian known for his near-obsessive attention to atmosphere, encouraged the actors to live in their characters. Not for performance, but for consistency. So they did. Meals were eaten in character. Conversations between Cammy and Luna sometimes unfolded at midnight in the common areas, without crew, without notes. Just two people slowly bleeding into their roles. The actress playing Cammy, who had only ever done indie dramas before, kept a video diary every night. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she needed a way to hold onto something of herself. Those diaries later became part of the marketing campaign. What the audience didn't know was that the tears in those videos, they weren't scripted. She was processing the weight of playing a character who was slowly losing her grip on reality, while experiencing that same sensation, day by day, hour by hour. Still, there were lighter moments, too. The cast developed their own code words to break character. Pineapple meant they needed a break from method mode. Static meant someone felt emotionally overstimulated. The crew even adopted these cues. If someone shouted static over walkie-talkie, it meant the energy on set had shifted too far into something uncomfortable and needed a reset. A mindfulness coach was kept on standby, not as a gimmick, but as a real necessity. During downtime, the actors often retreated into the forest surrounding the compound. What started as casual walks quickly evolved into rituals of their own, picking a new path every day, staying completely silent, and returning only once the light had shifted. They said it helped them feel connected to the space. The cinematographer called it location-induced method immersion. Others just called it weird. But it worked. One of the strangest stories from the set came during the filming of the ritual scenes. There was a moment, a key moment, where the group sits in a circle under moonlight, letting go of digital ties. Originally, it was meant to be symbolic. The characters would recite scripted lines, toss prop phones into a ceremonial bowl, and chant a few lines. Simple. But the director had a different idea. He asked the actors to write letters to their real selves, handwritten and censored, describing what they wanted to release. Then, on the night of the shoot, he had them burn the letters instead of the props. What unfolded was unscripted. Raw. Several of them wept. One actor refused to say his line and instead walked into the trees, vanishing for over 2 hours before returning without a word. That take made it into the final cut. And when he watched it in post-production, he said only this: that wasn't acting. The bond among the cast became something of a mystery to the outside crew. They weren't exactly friends in the usual sense. They didn't hang out in trailers watching reruns or gossiping about other projects. But there was a reverence between them. An unspoken agreement. They knew they were in something fragile. Something dangerous. And they protected it. Even meals were treated like sacred time. Phones were banned, even for crew. The chef, a local woman who'd once worked at the real retreat the location had been, prepared plant-based meals served communally. No one was allowed to eat alone. The director insisted that these ceremonial meals, as he called them, helped maintain the equilibrium of the film's emotional charge. But equilibrium doesn't mean ease. There were days when things cracked. One camera operator, known for his steely professionalism, broke down after a 12-hour shoot in the compound surveillance room. He said he'd started seeing reflections that didn't match the actors. Shapes behind glass. Repeated gestures in different takes. He was convinced the cameras were capturing things that weren't being performed. He took a week off. When he returned, he refused to enter the building alone. The actress playing Luna had her own struggles. She was already known for her intense, immersive method work. But something about this role pulled her deeper than usual. She stopped using her real name on set. Refused to leave the compound. Slept in one of the retreat rooms instead of her hotel. At first, the crew indulged it. But as the shoot stretched on, concerns grew. One night, during a break, she sat in the garden for hours, repeating one line from the script over and over: "This isn't control. This is clarity." When asked if she needed help, she just smiled. And then there were the technical challenges. Filming with natural light is always risky. It's unpredictable. You're chasing shadows. Waiting for clouds to shift. But the crew embraced it. The lighting team worked with mirrors and reflective panels, bending sunlight through glass walls to capture the eerie serenity of the compound. Some shots took hours to set up, just for a single minute of footage. One particularly challenging scene, Cammy's realization in the surveillance room, was filmed entirely with practical light from the monitors themselves. No fill, no overheads. Just the flicker of data washing over her face. It was grueling. And it was stunning. The production ran longer than expected. Not because of delays, but because the story kept growing. The actors kept finding new layers. Scenes written as brief became sprawling improvisations. Dialogue shifted. Whole arcs were rewritten in the middle of shooting, not to fix errors, but to chase emotional truth. Post-production was its own labyrinth. The editor, a quiet man with a reputation for calm under pressure, began having vivid dreams about the film. Dreams of being inside the compound. Of hearing lines from the script in places that didn't exist. He started working only at night, claiming the footage felt different after dark. He never explained what he meant. But the final cut bears his fingerprints. Disjointed timelines, looping moments, and subtle differences in repeated scenes that make you question what's real and what's remembered wrong. One of the most poignant behind-the-scenes stories comes from the very last day of filming. The final shot had been captured. The gear packed. The compound quiet once again. And the crew gathered for one last meal in the meditation hall. No cameras. No performances. Just people, together, finishing something they weren't sure they fully understood. Someone asked the director if he felt the film would make an impact. He paused, looked out through the glass wall into the encroaching dusk. "It already has," he said. "We just haven't seen it yet." And then silence. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just complete. Like a door had closed. Or maybe, just maybe, something else had stepped through. Because long after the cameras stopped rolling, the story didn't let go. It stayed with the crew, with the cast, with anyone who got too close. Not because it was scary, but because it was true. Not literally, not factually, but emotionally, existentially. And maybe that's what they captured without even meaning to. Not a thriller, not a message, but a mirror. One that doesn't show your face, only what you're willing to trade it for. Sometimes, when the credits fade and the lights slowly rise, what lingers isn't a scene or a line or even a character. It's a question. A shape in the dark you can't quite name but still feel pressing against your ribs. That's what this story leaves you with. Not a tidy message, but a presence. Something unsettled. Something watching. Because underneath its hypnotic rhythm and minimalist beauty, this film isn't just about a character unraveling in a remote sanctuary of light and glass. It's about us. About now. About the terrifying truth of what happens when identity becomes a performance so convincing, we forget there was ever anything underneath. At its core, this is a story about transformation, but not the kind that ends in victory. Not the hero's journey we've grown so comfortable with. This is a much colder metamorphosis. A story of someone who wanted to be seen, and in being seen, was devoured. The transformation isn't physical. It's existential. It's a slow erasure of doubt, a reshaping of self, until the original soul is no longer recognizable, even to the person living it. And that idea, of self as product, is the film's heartbeat. The theme of identity as currency pulses through every scene, every whispered mantra, every sterile corner of the retreat. Cammy, when we meet her, is hungry, not for fame, but for meaning. For relevance. She doesn't want millions of followers or glamorous brand deals. She just wants to matter. To be more than noise in the void. But the story makes something chillingly clear. In a world where influence is the new currency, wanting to matter is the first step toward surrender. Everything in the compound operates under the illusion of healing, Yet every ritual is a transaction. You give up pieces of yourself, stories, traumas, doubts, and you're rewarded with affirmation, clarity, belonging. But it's not you who's being nurtured. It's your potential, your marketability, your shape as a vessel for other people's wants. This is why performance is such a dominant symbol throughout the film. From the moment Cammy arrives at the retreat, the act begins. Not overtly, not with lights and makeup, but with posture, with tone, with the gentle way people smile a second too long, or tilt their heads just enough to be endearing. Everyone is performing, not for each other, but for the omnipresent gaze of the machine. The cameras aren't hidden. They're woven into the architecture, into the mirrors, into the walls, and eventually into the characters themselves. The symbol of the mirror is everywhere, literal, visual, and metaphorical. Cammy is mirrored constantly, in reflective surfaces, in the words repeated back to her, in Luna's eerily synchronized movements. The deeper she falls into the compound's world, the more her reflection becomes distorted, not in the sense that it's warped or monstrous, but in the way that it duplicates. There are scenes where she speaks and hears her own words echoed before she's finished saying them. Moments when she watches herself on screen and can't tell whether the footage is old, live, or fabricated. The mirror, in this story, doesn't show you who you are. It shows you what the world wants you to be. And that's the danger. Because once you start sculpting yourself to fit the reflection, you begin to vanish. This connects deeply to the film's exploration of surveillance as spirituality. That's one of the more unnerving ideas lurking behind the story. That watching someone has become a sacred act. That confession isn't just shared, it's monetized. That vulnerability is no longer personal, but performative. The compound doesn't force anyone to reveal themselves. It simply offers a stage. And once people step into the light, they can't help but spill their truths. But the moment they do, they're no longer theirs. Pain in this story is data. Trauma is content. And healing? Healing is the most seductive product of all. That's why the rituals matter. They aren't healing ceremonies. They're rebranding sessions. Every character is slowly stripped of messiness, contradiction, autonomy. They are edited, not by a cruel hand, but by love, by soothing voices, by elegant phrasing. The edits feel like growth, but they are subtraction. And eventually, all that's left is a version of self that glows perfectly on camera, and disappears when the feed ends. The symbol of light is crucial here. Everything is bathed in it. Natural light, candle light, screen light. There's almost no darkness in the traditional sense. But it's not comforting. It's exposing. Cammy is constantly lit, constantly framed by a glow that feels more surgical than sacred. Even the forest rituals, filmed under moonlight and flickering lanterns, have a curated quality to them. The light doesn't warm. It reveals. It reveals and it records. The light becomes a force of judgment. Not moral judgment, but aesthetic. What looks good? What resonates? What aligns with the brand? And then there's Luna. She isn't just a character. She's a living symbol. Not of power, but of surrender so complete it becomes indistinguishable from control. Luna is what happens when someone offers up every piece of themselves to the machine and is rewarded with worship. She's the blueprint, the cautionary tale that no one in the film recognizes as one. Her words are scripture. Her presence is magnetic. But there's a deadness behind her eyes, a mechanical serenity that reveals what she's lost. Luna isn't lying. She believes. And that's the horror. Because the system doesn't require deception. It doesn't force conversion. It simply reflects your desire back to you in the most flattering light until you kneel willingly. Even nature becomes a symbol of manipulation. The garden, at first, seems wild and comforting, a place of solace. But slowly, we see the symmetry, the hidden irrigation, the way the plants are arranged for visual balance, not ecological harmony. Nature, like identity, is curated here. Organic chaos is replaced with aesthetic control. Even the wind feels like it's been rehearsed. Another recurring symbol is the circle. The retreat is built around circular rooms. Group sessions are held in rings. Meals are shared at round tables. There are no edges, no corners to hide in. The circle symbolizes inclusion, but also surveillance. No one leads. No one escapes. Everyone is seen. Always. The circle flattens hierarchy but amplifies pressure. It becomes a loop that tightens. It's in this setting, surrounded by light and mirrors and eyes, that the theme of self-erasure takes hold. Cammy begins as someone fragmented, unsure of herself, resistant to the idea of digital personas. But that resistance is her integrity. And what the story does, slowly and with unbearable elegance, is peel it away. Not through confrontation. Through comfort. Through invitation. By the time she realizes she's being rewritten, the final draft is already complete. And that brings us to one of the film's quietest, most devastating themes. Consent isn't always loud. No one forces Cammy to change. No one threatens her. She says yes again and again, in small ways. She agrees to the retreat. She opens up. She accepts the light. She allows herself to be watched. Not because she's weak. Because she's human. Because we all crave connection. And the story's brilliance is in how it shows how easy it is to mistake assimilation for evolution. The moment she uploads the data, believing she's reclaiming her story, exposing the truth, is framed not as victory, but as entry. She doesn't escape. She completes the transformation. Because the truth isn't a threat to the machine. It's fuel. Even rebellion can be branded. Even resistance, if filmed beautifully enough, becomes content. And that's where the final theme lands hardest. Nothing is incorruptible. Not identity. Not emotion. Not even truth. Everything in this world can be absorbed. Flattened. Repurposed. The machine doesn't care who you are. It only cares if people are watching. So when the last shot shows Cammy smiling into the camera, bathed in soft light, speaking her truth with practiced ease, it's not a betrayal. It's a baptism. She has been seen. She has been chosen. She is ready. And the mirror? It's still there, waiting for the next reflection. Some films tell stories. Others create experiences. And then, once in a rare while, a film manages to do both, quietly, methodically, almost as if it's not trying at all. That's the trick, of course. Mala Influencia doesn't announce itself with bombast or spectacle. It seeps into you through softness, through suggestion, through the kind of visual and sonic detail that doesn't shout, but whispers so convincingly, you follow without realizing. And by the time you understand how deeply you've been drawn in, it's too late. You're inside it. And it's inside you. That slow, unsettling immersion wasn't a happy accident. It was engineered. Every inch of this film was sculpted with intention, not in the flashy, obvious way, but with an obsessive attention to how atmosphere works when no one's looking directly at it. The kind of atmosphere that makes the hair on the back of your neck rise, not because of what you saw, but because of what you felt. Start with the camera. The cinematographer, whose past work leaned heavily on documentary realism, made a radical decision early on. The camera would never feel like it was chasing the characters. It wouldn't dart, or flinch, or jostle with handheld urgency. Instead, it would float. It would drift. Every shot was built around the illusion of detachment. The lens was a presence, never directly intrusive, but never absent either. It watched. Some scenes, particularly those within the retreat's inner sanctum, were filmed with long, uninterrupted takes. No cuts, no relief. Just slow, gliding movements that circled the characters like a silent predator. The effect was subtle, but it changed everything. When a character sat in silence, the camera didn't cut away. It hovered, held them. And in that stillness, vulnerability grew. But it wasn't just about stillness. It was about surveillance. That was the hidden language of the lens. The compound's architecture, its glass walls, its endless corridors, created natural vanishing points. The camera would often frame Cammy in the center of these, emphasizing how exposed she was. Even when alone, she was positioned as if someone, or something, was observing her. The message was clear: privacy isn't absence. It's a performance.